And thank you so much for agreeing to do this. I've been enjoying speaking to you over the past couple hours. But for those of us, for those who are joining us now, if you could, introduce yourself.
My name is Ant Hatcher, Raymond Anthony Hatcher Johnson, and I'm from a band called the Original African Indians, the OAI. I've got Native and African roots and heritage. I am an animist. I practice my indigenous culture pretty much 100%. I have no organized religion. I believe in every indigenous African, darker people of the world's spirituality. And I come from Harlem, and I'm from North Carolina, from close to a place called the Kuala Boundary Indian Reservation. And both are very important for me. I've lived all over the world. I've lived in England, Holland, Denmark, Africa, Japan, and travel all across America, Korea. And I've got to meet people from the Maori people to indigenous people everywhere in the world.
That's beautiful. And earlier in the car, you were telling me about that you did a DNA test.
Yeah.
What did that reveal?
Oh, well, I mean, it wasn't my Indian side that I was more concerned about, because I know when you're here, what you're raised with, some of your culture, some of it people come back to, like they weren't raised properly with the culture, but as they grow older, they hear that where they're connected to, and they're desperately trying to connect back with that source. Sometimes it's easy, sometimes it's not easy, depending on the nation that you're going to.
What made you do a DNA test?
It was learning my African side.
Okay.
I didn't know where we were from Africa. I'd gone to Europe, and I was in England, and I remember talking with people, and I was saying, they were like, "Where are you from?" I said, "Well, I'm mixed. I'm African Native American," and they said, "What part of Africa?" And I was like, I didn't know what to say to that, because we don't know, because of slavery and the diaspora. So, and what was funny is that I had already been to Africa, and people thought I was Fulani. I'm carrying flutes, and I look Fulani. Then I found out I'm part Fulani. Okay. And then when I did my DNA, I found out that I was Senegalese, Gambian, Togo, Benin, Ghana, Bantu, and migrated Egyptian. Mm-hmm.
What is migrated?
And the Congo.
What is migrated Egyptian?
It means that that at one point, it's no secret that African people were the original descendants of heaven and earth. So when you deal with Khemet, the land of Egypt and Ethiopia, Eritrea, Somalia, Sudan. These are what is for these people.
How did you feel finding out that you were part migrated Egyptian?
When I found out about the Egyptian part, my sister had done a DNA test, and they ran the test, and we were related to Ramses II. Not like cousins or anything like that, but direct descendants, like grandfathers, because she paid extra for that. A lot of people go against the DNA thing because they say they're going to take your information. If they want your DNA, they can get your DNA off anything anyway. It's not impossible to get these things. I did it because there was a part of me that my African side was just needed to know where my line had originated, because by the time I had done my DNA, I had already lived in Senegal, Gambia, and a little bit in Mali. So for me to learn that not only were the places that I've been to part of my lineage, and I just naturally was taken there, but the Egyptian side, which I was always interested in, Ra, the sun and Horus and Isis, and I've always felt that they were more I felt closer to them than anything else. And the first immaculate conception between Osiris and Isis, which created the creative spirit Horus, the light of the world, the sun, the light of the world is still here today. So to know I was, and I'm not going to say I'm not the only one. It's just to know that I was closer than I'd ever dreamed. That to know that was a direct connection with me. And there was a meaning why I found when I walked into the British Museum and I saw the statues of Ramses and all this. And I just was like, I was home. When I went into the British Museum and the massive stand of Ramses II, for example, and looking at that face, like I'm looking at a relative, like I'm like, you know, it was so close. And to see how the Europeans had knocked the noses off kind of made me laugh, because it's like, you know, we already know what you're up to. So like, it was a truth, and it helped me, like, you know, ground myself and realize, you know, stay humble. You know, just because you're related to somebody doesn't mean that's what you are. But when you have that in your DNA and your practice, then you realize why I've made so many important decisions in my life to follow the Red Road, the native path, hang out with the Maori people from New Zealand and learn from them, and to try to cross-pollinate as much as possible, to let every indigenous nation in the world know you're not alone, you're not isolated. There are people in Papua New Guinea that, you know, and there's the people in Bogeyville that were attacked and had a war with the Coconut Wars. And the South Senegalese, when they had the Casamance, and there's the soldiers out there that can't come home because, you know, it's a healing time, but it's also, because we have the internet and an ability, time to reach out and grab onto each other really tight, so that when anything goes on, we have each other as that glue that holds us together. So knowing that I'm from that ancient Egyptian background, and really the beginning part of it, and that's a part of me, I felt that was an affirmation of being more than just a person that follows the, as the Lakota say, the Wasichu blueprint, because I don't really follow that, the white man's blueprint. And I mean by the Wasichu, I don't mean like every white person, because there's beautiful people all over the world. I don't separate, you know, humanity. Like, we're just human beings. Like, we're fallible. Don't get your ego, you know, because the Creator can cut your light out at any time.
You also found out, you were telling me earlier, that part of your DNA is also white, no?
Yeah, I got some Italian and I've got some British. And I lived in England, and I was in love with Italian girls. When they start talking, I was like melting. I can hear violins like Lujan, like.
Beautiful. Yes, no, you know, at the end of the day, we are one. I was telling you earlier, there was this anthropologist, I forget his name, I'm going to have to research it, but they did a study where they went from Cape Town all the way to Northern Europe, and there was not one place on that line where they could say this group or this ethnic group or this tribe or whatever starts and this tribe ends. So essentially we are one. But one of the reasons that I wanted to talk to you, and what really grabbed my attention when we were in Fort Lauderdale a couple of days back for the Fela Kuti film and the panel discussion that followed, you mentioned your heritage. You mentioned that you are part Native American and part African of African descent, and that really grabbed my attention. And I've always wondered about, well, both the experiences of both communities, and then how that intersection distills itself in one person. So a person who identifies as Native as well as African. You know, the Native people here were the guardians of this land that we're on. They were the original settlers here, and they invited, or they welcomed, the people who came across from Europe.
They didn't invite anybody.
They didn't invite, I agree. They welcomed.
It's just people landed up on the shore. Somebody walked in your backyard.
Okay.
Or your front yard.
Yes. And then the African American part, you had black people forced to come here.
Not necessarily. I don't believe that. I believe African people had already been here 25, 50,000 years before, because of the currents. The currents now go towards Africa, but because of cataclysm, the actual currents used to come back this way. There are Olmecs, which are the giant statues, and not 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 years old. They're older. And there's other forms and other civilizations that have been there before, mimicking our Egyptian and Khemet Kemetic backgrounds. So African people had come from the south north, and then the Mongolians and the Asians came west, and there's an amalgamation which makes this land so amazingly amazing because of the mixing of the clans and the cultures, making this one people.
You are you are entering territory that is fascinating for me, and I agree with you. I mean, you look at the.
It's not a conspiracy.
It's not a conspiracy. You look at the. No, it can't be a conspiracy.
It's not a lie.
You've got there's the physical testimony of that all over the Americas, from the Easter Island statues to the Olmec statue. It's all over. For people who are looking for it, and there are people who are researching that and writing about it, and so it's very interesting. But that is one. Let's put a pin on that for 1 second. But the people that I'm referring to is in the past 400 years, right? The past 400, 500 years, the people that were forced to come over.
What, they were forced?
Some of the slave trade I'm referring to.
Okay.
So some of the, for example, the people that you mentioned are your ancestors, the Galagichi. A lot of that community came during that time. Am I incorrect?
Yeah. Well, most of them came through the islands of Jamaica, St. Thomas, Haiti, and like my grandfather Bumpy, he was they were from Maroons and they were fishermen. And so they came to South Carolina and Charleston, and they were fishermen.
That's beautiful. My grandmother on my mother's side, my great grandmother on my mother's side was Maroon, from Jamaica.
Yeah. So we got some cousins. We might be related too. But check our DNA. If I see you up on my DNA, I'm gonna laugh. You're like, hey cousin, loan me $20.
I'm one of those that didn't do a DNA or hasn't done a DNA test yet, because I'm like, why would I want to have? But you're right. Anybody can get it. My sister's done it. So. But going back to what I wanted to explore with you. Some of that ancestry could be the older African, and of course the older African existence here in the Americas. We're all at some point descended from Africa. That's clear. But having that heritage, or having those people in 3, 4, 5, not 5, 6, 7 generations removed who came here forced on ships, and then those who, whether they welcomed them, the
descendants of the diaspora.
Yeah, having that distilled in you as a person, how has that impacted your worldview and how you pursue life?
You get on with it. If you're a darker person or this world or a Caucasian person, you persevere. And I just think that, and I don't think so, I know that Africans, what we've been through from slavery, and that's the funniest thing, is that we're not starting our history there. They're always going to keep us there, because once you just keep somebody there, it's very easy to have them stay at that one base. Instead of just having a dream like we had Martin Luther King yesterday, you just got to remember that we're in this isn't a dream, this is reality. So for us to practice what our traditions are means you take yourself away the control of religion and politics. So I think everything really is about, going back to tradition. And you don't all have to overdo it. If you ever go on a run let's just think of it as like culture. You ever go on a run and you start jogging down the road and everything, and people say, I hate running. What? Why? Because I get tired and push myself just too much. I say, well, then slow down when you want to slow down. Speed up when you want to speed up. Learn what you can. Get what words that you can from your culture. If you can learn a word from African language or Khemet, or read something, it's yours. It's something that you can keep for yourself and pass to other people and to your children. It's yours. And the more that you pick up and the more that you learn, I can guarantee the more interested you're going to be, because there's nothing sustainable in this American lifestyle. It's not sustainable. It's built on, there's enough out there, let's just tear it down and use it. And obviously it's not. And anybody that's indigenous in the world knows that things are finite. You have to take care of things. There's a balance between things. That's why when, in Florida, when you're walking around, a lot of the nature's been decimated here. So when it comes back to like what you were saying about diaspora and being 6 generations behind, or whatever the generations were, I think the 60s have changed everything.
It's not that you're behind. Like one, I was mentioning earlier that I have this podcast. I'm the host of a podcast, and I've had several guests who are Native American. They are doctors, they're PhD trained psychiatric mental health nurses. And one of the questions I asked them was, is there anger? They do research in Native American communities related to substance use disorders, and trying to not correct, but trying to provide the tools to manage these things. And I asked, are the young people angry for what happened to their ancestors? And they said yes.
It's still happening.
Yeah.
The amount of drug abuse on the reservations is rampant. Like in up the northern areas, it's methamphetamines, and on Cherokee, it's like opioids, maybe some meth too, but mostly opioids. So like that doesn't come from anywhere. It's like Native people aren't pushing that to yourself 100%. That's coming from somewhere. That's just a way to destabilize your culture.
Yeah.
And make sure they got money for the prison industrial complex.
So, are you angry at what happened here?
I have been periodically, but I think anger needs to be cold.
And how do you do that?
I just be thankful. If I'm really angry, really upset, I've had things that can just throw you off from the core, like this Godfather of Harlem thing. That was really heavy. But the anger that you got, it's like this. I'm thankful. I'll say thank you 7,000 times a day. I could say thank you. By the time I say thank you, Creator, thank you, Mother, thank you, the ocean, thank you, everything that I can, and I get down to people, my brother, my sister, and by the end of it, I'm so thankful. I even get to the people that were kind of like my enemies or that tried to hurt and come to make through. I just say thank you, because Creator's giving you the opportunity to write your own story, and your own story is better than anything else that anybody else can tell, especially if it's based on the truth. Okay.
Coming now to your story. Tell me about your family history, because that's also fascinating. I didn't realize who I was riding in the car with until until we talked and you told me more about who your great grandparents were.
I was born on a river. Part of our traditions, I can go really far back, but for the most part, I'll let you know, my grandfather, his name is Raymond Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson, and I'm Raymond Anthony Hatcher Johnson. I'm the great-grandson of Bumpy Johnson. The reason I say I'm the grandson is because my grandfather and my great-grandfather, my grandfather Mamie, adopted my mom because my grandma Rita had my mom at a very young age. So my great-grandpa and my great-grandma adopted my mother as their child, so they, take custody and help raise her and stuff. So they're by paper my grandparents, but lineage-wise, he's my grandfather, and he comes from the islands of Jamaica, St. Thomas, all that. They moved around. They were fishermen, but they're Maroons. Very dark black man, very well known as a race man. He was a person that was a freedom fighter and a gangster, but also like a Robin Hood type of guy. Yeah, and then there's my grandma Mamie, and my grandma Mamie is from the native side. Grandma comes from the Kuala Boundary Indian Reservation, and She was born just outside of Asheville in 1915.
You were telling me about your where your grandmother was from and her name?
My grandmother is Mamie Laura Hatcher Johnson. After she got married, Hatcher's a very popular name in Cherokee. And our family are on the roll for the Chickasaw and Cherokee and on the Doss roll. And Lucilla Hatcher, which is her mother. And they're mixed black and native, but they're raised on and off. And when they were kids, there was these residential schools and everything, so they had to kind of go from Asheville to near Raleigh in Sonora County. Just to not go to those schools, they would just play themselves off as if they were, different, just black or whatever. But being there meant that there was a chance you had to go to the residential schools. Residential schools were not copacetic; they weren't good. So grandma was on and off, but we had the uncles and the aunts on and around there. So Cherokee, the Smoky Mountains.
And did you grow up knowing about your native?
A little bit. I lived there on and off. I visited relatives and uncles and aunts and stuff. And I would stay there and live there for a while and come back to New York and then back there and then back to New York and then, South Carolina to Charleston and then back to New York. So then I was upstate New York and Harlem. So I moved around a lot. My mom had told me this brother Vincent had gotten shot. So when I was 2.5 years old, my dad had died. My mom had cancer, so I went to live with uncles and aunts. So for years, I was popped back and forth. And like when I went to Cherokee and I was down in the Qualla Valley, I just, like every other kid, looking for frogs and snakes. I couldn't believe all the wildlife, growing up with that and getting caterpillars and having caterpillar races and wrestling matches with your cousins and stuff like that and making rafts and everything and going out into the swamps and to the lakes and, just being really creative as a kid, standing in nature, really having a balance with nature as a child, loving to go out there thinking I'm going to see the little people and the spiritual. I mean, that was my thing, to go out there like that and just sometimes on my own and just catch snakes. And also just hear certain things and I could feel things that were there, and I don't, that living entities and beings and such around me since I was a little kid. So.
And you were never afraid of the snakes?
No. I got bit. I was bit by a copperhead when I was a kid. I got a mark right here. Trying to catch it. Went to the hospital with my uncle. But it's just something with animals you just have to understand. Like it's like that with people, you have to understand their nature. Once you understand their nature and what to do and what not to do, and when you might want to show caution and always respect, then you're dealing with the whole world and everything that you deal with, everything around you.
For people who might not know his story, I'm from Ethiopia, and and a lot of the people who, like, if I put some of this stuff on YouTube, you'll have quite a few Ethiopians looking at it.
Yeah, Ethiopia.
Who was your? Could you tell us who your grandfather was?
Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson was born in 1905 in Charleston, South Carolina. He came to New York when he was a young man, around 14 years old, after my Uncle William had killed a white man in South Carolina, in Charleston, and had to, when they bailed him, he just ran. But because they bailed him up against the house, my grandfather had, they put the bail against the house. So my grandfather had to come to New York and hustle. At the age of 14, he met my uncles in New York, and he met with my aunts, and one of the aunts didn't really accept him, and it was a big issue. He started on the streets of New York in the 1920s and early 1900s when he was a teenager and going up against the gig guys. So what happened is that you would have a row of shops or anything, and my grandfather would be like on the corner with his friends. Like if you wanted to rob those shops paid my grandfather to make sure they didn't get robbed. And he was a young guy, and there were other grown men, and he would be like, no, this is my corner. So grandpa was just a badass when he grew up. He was, like straight up. And he met with a lady named Madam Sinclair, and he became like a bodyguard and worked with her. But he was very intelligent. My grandfather was sharp, but a gentleman as well. and a really quiet, strong man, black man. He started working with the numbers with her, and then she got out of the business, and he became the man who was in charge of the numbers. And by proxy, he became the main man for all of New York, really, but for Harlem specifically. And the Italian mob had to respect him and wouldn't mess with him because of Lucky Luciano, who was the head of the mob. Lucky had a problem with a guy named Dutch Schultz during the Cotton Club days. Also Louis Armstrong, other people. My grandfather grew up with everybody. So Dutch had an issue with my grandfather over something, and they went off, and my grandfather managed to work it, because my grandfather went to jail with Lucky and saved his life in prison. And they used to play chess. My grandfather was an amazing chess player. He would just clear the boards. He used to play in the streets around people. And so he became the kingpin of New York, of Harlem especially. And there's a whole stories about that and people ripping off that. But, you know, there's a powerful lesson in that, because he was good friends with Malcolm X. Mm-hmm. It was Jimi Hendrix got to Europe because my grandfather paid for him to get there, gave them money. There's all types of things that were going on with my grandfather, but I can't talk too much about that, because there's things going on with that. Because, you know, in Native we say we got to count coup, coming back at something right now. We'll let that stay right there and keep it as a, you know, tell the rest of the story later.
Enough to whet people's appetite, I think, and to give an understanding of the legacy, the heritage that you come from. Mm-hmm. Another thing you mentioned on our car ride down is that you joined the Marines as a young man. How did that come about?
I got drunk, they knocked me over the head, I woke up in a uniform. No. I was a teenager. I didn't want to go to college. I was done with formal education. I was in private school.
Mm-hmm. Keep going.
Yeah, it's okay. I was in private school. Mm-hmm. And I just seen like a lot of kids in Harlem on the streets that were not doing anything with their life. They were just on the corners or working really bad jobs after getting a young girl pregnant, and they're young teenagers. Now they've got that responsibility. They kind of lost that adventure in their life. They just had to hold it down. And it just didn't look good. There were people going to jail and bad things happening, and like there were people being killed left and right because of the crack. And also just, you know, Harlem had just gone up. After my grandfather died, they saturated the streets with drugs because my grandfather wouldn't allow that to happen.
Mm. When did he go to jail?
When didn't he go to jail? Half of his life he was in prison. He helped the guys escape from Alcatraz. So it was a choice, really, because I had to. College wasn't an option. I got a scholarship to St. John's for music. I was like, I got to do what prerequisites? What, mathematics? Done with math. It's not my strong point. And then we started getting these recruiters coming to this high school, but I also started watching Rambo and Platoon, and there was something with the brotherhood of it. Like, no matter what, you guys are just going to stand together and make sure, like, you know, you got each other's back. There was a tribal, a family type of a strength, not as in a bullying strength, but really a brotherhood to know that you guys can go through whatever. And that's a very Native thing. Most of the men in my family went in the military. So what happened is I went to boot camp, and it was hard. Marine Corps boot camp. I went to Paris Island, and it was grueling. It was 3 months, and every day was like a week, or every day was like 2 weeks. It was grueling. And from the moment we got there, 72 hours, no sleep, like just all the 24 hours straight. And I remember wanting to quit. And then the one thing that came into my mind is, I can't go to my grandma Mamie and not succeed, because she done raised me. And with my other mom, Margaret, and everybody else, and my brother Ray, I said, I have to do this because I want to go back. I want to put those dress blues on, and I want to take my grandma out to Red Lobster. And I did. You know? Like when you knock on the door and you surprise her and she's crying at the door because she hadn't seen you, and she's shaking, and you say, Grandma, get ready, we're going to Red Lobster. And you got a car downstairs. You're like, oh, Anthony, you can drive that. Then shouldn't we take a taxi? Grandma, get in the car. You know what I mean?
That's beautiful.
Like, I've been waiting for months to take you out right now. This is my date. This is my grandma. I'm taking Grandma Mamie out. We going out. We gonna eat some lobster. It was the best time of my life.
This is after how many years?
No, that was after a few months. I hadn't separated really from my grandmother. Even though I was raised with different parts of my family, when my mom had cancer when I was a kid, it's just me and my grandma, like, that's my ace boom coon. That's my girl. That's my love, that's my grandma. If you got a grandma like that, you're going to understand what I'm talking about. Some people got rotten grandmas. I feel so sorry for you that you got a grandma you don't like. I hope you got two. You can choose one. Sometimes you get that with people. One that they don't like, some that they do like, and it's kind of like, I just go to her house. The other one is like, oh, grandma, just don't kiss me, kind of thing.
Yeah, you're lucky. Yeah, that's good. That's a blessing. You said something about your motivation beyond making sure that you didn't end up not doing much with your life. There was also something that you wanted to do, and that was to protect. Tell me about that.
Protect?
To protect your family, you said.
When I went to North Carolina, I talked with my Uncle Samuel and my Uncle Melvin. Mm-hmm. Both were sun dancers, people that were traditional. They'd gone up to Crow Dogs up in South Dakota. And when I was a kid in '79. And they're just really cool guys. My Uncle Champ was a little bit like heavy-handed. He'll like pull off the belt and stuff. Back then we had that, I'm not saying it's right, but that's what happened. And I was fast, so I didn't get hit that much. And hit in the cornfields. So I went down to my Uncle Samuel and my Uncle Melvin, and I talked with them, and I like, I'm sitting with you now, and we were just talking like, on the pipe, I got a little fire, because I goes, I'm joining the Marine Corps. And they're like, you? And I was like, I've always been like the rebel, like, no, this is Indian land, this is black, we wear our reparations. You know what I'm saying? Like, I've been always one of those kids like that, like rebellious. Not to rebel just for the idea of rebellion, but rebellion because something's right, and saying like, okay, we had Martin Luther King, Leonard Crow Dog, we have Leonard Peltier, who's still in prison right now. We have and had people that sacrificed everything to make sure that you had a future unbridled by any form of slavery. And the slavery is happening right now in Libya. It's happening right now in the world where they're trying to instill slavery again. Don't sleep. So the idea of protecting was also being knowledgeable, because you can go out there, and I think it's important. No, I think it's important to learn, to read every aspect of everything. You want to read their side. If there's a there, and maybe your side, and something that's in them, just listen. And don't judge just all the time. Just, all right, that's what it is. So when you learn that, then you can say, I'm going to make my choice to stand with this right now because this makes sense to me. This is what Creator would have wanted. This is something that means this right. So for me to learn that, when I with my uncles, for example, they said, when you get that Marine Corps training, if anything happens down here and they come against us, you can stand with your people and protect your own people, protect your kids, because it's not the first time that, America's so tumultuous. Every 4 years, you never know what you're going to get, and it's still run by the same shadow government, which is corporations. It's not a lie. It's not true. So we're living, that's what we live with. It's a fact. It's not a conspiracy. It's reality of what we live with. So now we're in this special time where we have the knowledge. You got guys that'll sit down and talk on the internet and tell you how things are. I listen sometime to other podcasts, by other people, and I'll listen to their perspective, and and I'll disagree and agree, but at least I've got the knowledge and the information to stand on something. So when somebody walks at somebody and they want to hurt somebody, no matter if you don't know the story or not, you're not supposed to go up and just attack somebody. We're past that. We're greater beings. If I really want to hurt you, I don't have to touch you. I don't have to be nowhere near you. but it has repercussions. So does hurting people physically. So stay in the medicine, stay in the prayer, stay on the red road, stay on the road of the black road with the African heritage. That's what we're here for, to realign with that. So we were talking about that before, right?
Yeah.
The diaspora?
Yes, absolutely.
Learning that where we come from again?
Yeah.
And receiving those practices again? Even if you've been away from it all your life and you're a 49-year-old man and you just learned how, or a woman, and you just learn not just your heritage, but that you love something about that culture, even if you're not from that culture, you could still stand and learn. You could be humble and just learn from that. And that's just strength. Humility is a strength. Because ego will stop you from growth. Ego will have you thinking to yourself, oh, I'm the greatest this or I'm the greatest that. I don't have to do nothing. They should be coming over here at my door, and then you don't get any gigs. You have to go out there and do it.
No, absolutely. Talking about gigs.
Yeah.
Well, before we go into the music. So how long were you with the Marines and where did you go?
I was with the Marines for about 3.5 years. And from Parris Island, I went to Camp Lejeune, North Carolina for Marine Corps combat training. Then went off to Virginia for transportation management official, customs and all that stuff. Then I flew over to San Diego, where I flew over to Okinawa, which was my duty station for 2 years, living up in the tropics, hanging out with my sports car, my Japanese girlfriends, and a little motorcycle with my friend Eric, and, you know, living that life, diving, snorkeling, you know, doing that type of work. And then, you know, I had a situation in the Marine Corps, which was unpleasant, with a very racist gunnery sergeant that said the wrong thing at the wrong time. The platoon went 50-50 because people weren't into that. And then and I got out with an honorable discharge after going through a little bit of stress. It was a stressful time. It was war. We had long times, and I had I went over post-traumatic, so to say. Things just got intense. Yeah.
Did you have your dreads then?
My locks? You can't have locks in the Marine Corps. You can't have hair in the Marine Corps. 3 at the top, nothing on the sides.
Yeah, and when did the locks come?
The locks came the moment. It's funny. When I was up, when I met Chief Crow Dog again in 2020, before he passed away, Chief Crow Dog, Leonard Crow Dog. Before I met Chief Crow Dog, I went to the Sundance, and anyway, I don't want to talk too much about it out of respect, but I met the Chief again as a grown man, and I walked up to him, and I was just being sheepish because he's such a powerful, holy man. He's like, and I just don't want to just say like when I met Lee Perry, like I said the wrong thing, and he's like, I'm on Buckland. So like, I just want to just come up there correct and humble, like really, like we talked about before. And I was just like a little kid, you know. He's in his wheelchair, but he's bigger than me. And I walk up to Lexi, and I walk up to him, and I said, how you doing, Chief? And he goes, how long have you had your locks? And I said, ever since I was a little kid and I saw Bob Marley on stage the first time. In here and in here, they were already growing. But I started after I got out of the Marine Corps. And he goes, that's a good reason. You know? Right. That's a good reason. Yeah. Chief Crow Dog. Chief of Chiefs.
You don't want to talk more about that.
Well, no, I could talk about that family because they're good people. They're strong people. They're in the medicine path. They're not. You got to respect the Lakota way of life if you go up there, and Native way of life. You got to respect it.
What is for someone who has no idea? What is the Lakota way of life? And the path that you mentioned.
Those people are about sacrifice. You know, there's a lot of it's steeped in ritual, and it's always about language. You have to hold on to your language, even if it's words or if it's something. So when I go up there, I'm a guest. When I'm on the Lakota reservation, when I'm on Rosebud or I'm in Pine Ridge, and I'm doing ceremony and ritual, I'm always in like full respect, and I'm there to learn and help, to do what kind of good I can, and not only to learn, but to take part in the ceremony and the rituals that are there, and to be really humble and helpful. So when I'm there, I let them know that I'm there, like in every way. And from that, I've developed a family over the years of people that I love very dearly. I love them. They're good people.
tell me about your music now, because you are a musician.
Yeah.
Should
have been a plumber.
Why a plumber?
And I'm just saying, you're like constant paycheck, just laughing.
But when did that start? When did your journey as a musician, as an artist, begin?
Pots and pans. Pulling out the pots and pans outside and making noise. Watching people playing the hand drums and taking out a plastic pot that made a good sound and going out there and playing that. Learning, playing things, making reeds out of, making flutes out of reeds that were on the sides, and you just cut them at the top, and just whoop, whoop, you get two, whoop, whoop. And then later on playing flutes and drums and stuff like that. I started off, like, musically, it depends on what you mean, like, just the time that I was just enjoying, or the times that I was like getting paid for it, and it became something. That became when I was like 13. I was with my big brother and we started doing rap songs in the house, and what we would do sometimes is have a radio right here, and then you would have another radio right here, and so you would record on this radio, like say da 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 da, and then you take that tape out, put it in there, and you put another tape in, and then you let that one play, and that records that, and then you do another instrument. So we used to play basic, just off cassette tape, and bounce it to create a song, which was always less and less, but it existed.
Yeah.
So we started off like that and making dirty rap songs and stuff like that, and then I got into heavy metal big time and rock music, but it blew me away because it was so different. When coming back from like the South and like the forest, and then coming back to the city was stark. It was a totally different thing. It was stark. So when I got back to like New York, it wasn't like you can go out and with the animals and stuff, and the different jungles have different animals, and believe me, Harlem was a jungle. By the time I got there, it was the 70s, so there was the heroin epidemic, sometimes freebasing. I was right there. I got back in like 79, 78, right before the crack epidemic, which happened in a few years. So I got to see a lot. Growing up back and forth always to Harlem, I got to see how like you had the barbecues in the street, you had the shanty, like crabs guys that would go down in the street, and watching the growth of the deterioration of what had happened to Harlem and what we had to go through, because crack was like a huge atom bomb in my culture.
Yeah.
It was an atom bomb. It changed families, it got rid of different peoples, and it, everybody got involved in it, and not just crack, but the cocaine and the stuff. But my mom was like, she's just tough as nails. My mom was gangster as heck. She wouldn't let nobody say. My mom used to wear gold up and down up here like that. Mom was just like fearless. My mom was just like the kind of person, like if you standing right there and there's 100 people running at you and you my friend, or she likes you, you're a good person, my mom won't take a step back. She'll be right there with whatever to make sure that nothing happened to you. And that's the kind of like the way my family has always been. We just psychos, man. We just can't let people get hurt. If you love people, you got to practice your love.
Absolutely. And so music, how did it grow? What did it,
I grew up around the jazz musicians, and I grew up around rock music and all that other stuff. So by the time that I started, I had little bands and rock bands I used to play with. I was playing drum kit at the beginning. My grandma bought me a drum kit. So I was playing drum kits, and then I was electric guitars and synthesizers. I was always playing pianos, and there was always instruments around me. So I just took to everything and became a multi-instrumentalist. But, I was a pretty rubbish singer. I probably still am, but that's my job now, is to be a singer. And I went into the military, and I used to sneak out and do like music in Okinawa City with the metal bands, do Motley Crue and all these other cover stuff, and be on the kit with a wig on. And then I got out, and I was in a group called which was a rock and psychedelic metal band. And then I went over to Europe, and I had a dream one night, and the name, the symbol, and everything came to me. It was the original African Indians. Okay, Africa is Albalculon, and we're not Indians, but that's what came, the OAI, that symbol that, I was telling you about. And it really came into me like a vision, not just a dream, a vision, because when I woke up, I drew what I saw, like it was still there, and that's different. So I had my first show in Holland with the African Indians. Within the week I formed it, I had a group that I was playing with that were Dutch, we used to do shows and just make it up as we go along, like jam everything, but it was just really good musicians, drummers, synthesizers, we get other people. And I got everybody to do this show in a place called North by the Kassaye. It was a concert, and there was about 2,000 people there. And we didn't know what we were going to do. We had a few ideas, but we had 2 hours to do it, and we blasted it. And it was a full moon. It was like that was the birth of the African Indians, and we went everywhere with it. And that's always been my heart. That band is like, you know, even when other people are like, oh man, you should kick that and start something new and whatever. Even when I was playing with so and so and so and so and famous so and so, it was like, you know, no. But then funniest thing happened when COVID hit. I'm always going to be from the original African Indians, but the one thing that stood with me were the drum circles, because everything else had stopped. And then we came into it, and we still met with each other. Hundreds of people in Miami Beach, and hundreds of people in different places, and people would drum together. And we were like, whatever, we're here with the sun, we're here with these drums, we're here with our prayer, we don't live in fear. So the drumming took place, and I had a little microphone with me, and I would put my music on and other people's music, and I would walk down the beach singing my songs with my little Bluetooth, one of those mics, and then other people would come up to me, and I was like, hey, you want to sing something? I put on the Rolling Stones or whatever they want to sing some native songs to them, whatever, just to, you know, with the backing karaoke, and it kept that semblance of things. So I know that music is more than just that. It's more. It's the beginning of time and space. So the African Indians for me is what I breathe. It's what I am. It's more than just the culture. It's the living life. It's now. It's yesterday and it's tomorrow. If I'm here, if I'm not here.
Yeah. Where are the rest of your bandmates?
All over the world.
And when do you come together?
Different times. Holland was one place, and then I had another version of it in Denmark, and then I had another version of it in England, which was where it really blew up. And my first drummer was actually Danish. His name was Brian Hedeman, and he and I formed the group, and we got jazz musicians, Kevin Davey, who was African descent, and Dahu Mumaji, and it was more, and Jackson Baird, and Graham, and it was like a big amalgamation. We had up to like 12 people on stage at one point, because everybody just wanted to play with the Indians. So when we got on stage, we had the songs set, what we practiced, but there was always room for people to come in and just do something, and just be a part of it. And I was always willing to say, okay, if you want to put a break here, or if this happens, just let it go. So that the music breathed. It just wasn't this tight ass, like just one thing or another. And inevitably people wanted to play with the Indians. So sometimes people would just show up with a horn or a banjo or whatever, or a drum. Yeah, okay, come in at this point, and I would just put them on stage. And if it worked out, I kept them on stage. And if it didn't, we changed it around what they were playing to have a little bit of fun. But there were things that I had to stick to, like lyrically, or else it just wouldn't work. And it's embarrassing to be on stage doing something that's not working when you're trying to sing something, believe me.
You're bearing your soul.
Yeah.
It's very vulnerable in a way position to be in. But so what kind of, like, what genre of music, how would you describe the music?
Epic eclectic. Epic because it's big, like Gandalf the Great. Oh! And it's eclectic because I love like a lot of different things. And I don't have to love every type of music, but I might like something from that genre. And that's good enough. You know, so if something feels good, it's good. But I like music that's honest, and I like things that are not generic. I don't like generic music at all. If you copy paste rhythms and music and stuff like that, it's not I can't listen to it. It's just boring to me. And I like honesty in music. I like if you're gonna sing something and that's what you're about, and you're really about that, like Groucho Marx, the great Groucho Marx, the comedian from the Marx Brothers, but from a long time ago, very important comedian. Back in the time with a Jewish family that were kind of pretending to be Italian so that they can get the work, because funny enough, in Hollywood, Jewish people weren't really accepted in Hollywood. Now they own Hollywood. But back then, the Marx Brothers and Groucho Marx wrote a book. He says, if I write a story and it's a biography, and someone writes it about me, or they write about someone like, you know, and they're not honest about it, they say something wrong, that's just their spin-off and they got it wrong. That's their thing. But if you write your own autobiography and you do your thing and you lie in your own autobiography, then you're a damn liar. Because this is the time you're supposed, you ever see a banker, for like you said, for example, where he's like, oh, I've done this and I was a good person and I saved this and I donated to this and that and I was a man of good intention. Well, that's a lot of bullshit, because you know that you done gone over there, put your money inside of Congo, you done gone over there, chop people's hands off. There's a history of what you have done from all the way, and and you could talk about the Masons or anything like that, but African people were the first to do it, and we're the best at it, and we're the ones with the responsibility to do it right. Indigenous and black people. So when you're talking honesty, so everything that I come through, if I'm going to listen to music, it has to be honest. Heavy metal was honest to me. Black Sabbath were honest to me. Even Barry Manilow was honest to me. Native indigenous music is nothing but honest. All over the world. And
Bob Marley.
And Bob Marley reggae music is just phenomenal. It's the greatest export of Jamaica. There's not bananas, not plantains, nothing. Reggae music. And it's reggae music just changed. I remember when I really started growing my locks, is what we were asking about before. It's like I was on 125th Street, just got out the Marines, and I already started growing my hair, and I started hanging out with this brother who was from Jamaica, and he's throwing me down Dennis Brown and all these other mixtapes, and I was just listening to it, and I was feeling it. I was like, wow. And reggae music is just such a powerful force, and it's a force that you got to be careful about it when the money starts coming in, because there's platforms that can injure other artists. And so if you're a successful reggae artist or a Marley or whatever, you got to be careful that you're not picking a platform that, because all these new platforms that don't pay the other artists properly. It's a weird thing. But I met Lee Perry on a number of occasions. I announced him on stage in Glastonbury Festival, and I've met so many people, the Marley people, Lenny from the Wailers, and I don't want to lame call, but I'm just saying that when you mention these people, it's just saying like, I'm sorry, but if I met Arnold Schwarzenegger, I would be like, yo, I just met Arnold Schwarzenegger. If I met Hulk Hogan, I'd be like, yo, that was Hulk Hogan. If I'd met, Muhammad Ali.
Absolutely.
That's not name calling. That's showing respect and saying, these people had something in our lives. We got to be careful about this kind of like this Yenda law where we're just kept underneath and we can't be something. Like Louis Armstrong said, play your horn. Play your horn if you have to play it. And that those people that I met have a profound influence in my life. A profound influence. They helped me get through. I remember when my mom had died and I was in England and I went to see Black Sabbath, and and I was watching it, and there was a power behind it when we were watching it, because it was their last shows touring ever, because Ozzy's sick. And my mom had just died like a month before, and I realized that I was going back to America, and I'd been going for 13 years straight. And I was watching it, and I remember being a young kid and listening to that music with the headphones, and although I loved the hip hop and I loved my pop music and the black music that was around me, there was so much violence that the music of the heavy metal and the rock and the other types of music and the classical music took me out of Harlem, where I was put in another level. I didn't have to just be where I was. I was in another place. So when I stepped out the door, I always felt I can do this and like lift up my head and be like, I've had to travel. I've just traveled. And I'm watching there, and all that reminded me of being a 13, 12-year-old kid. And, and we don't think about what happened with COVID and how that affected kids too, and what the music did to help them get through.
It still affects them, yeah.
Right? So don't sleep on the kids and their music either. Don't be stupid. The youth is powerful.
Oh, absolutely. No, I agree with you. And
when I watched Black Sabbath, and I saw them playing, and Ozzy and Tony Iommi and Geezer Butler and the drummer, and I was like, my mom died. And all these tears started coming out like a faucet. And I realized that not only was going home, but that this band and many other bands